Alrighty, guys, let's do a 2-for-1 here. Let's do 2 rumors for the price of 1, and let's talk about how likely each one of them could be in terms of the upcoming Star Wars projects. So, I have in recent days, because we've been doing a lot of topics here about rumors and reports and things like that, and I always have to give the disclaimer here because it's just important to lay the groundwork that there are some sources in Hollywood that I think are very, very reputable, including Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, and Variety. Then there are other people who have a lot of inside knowledge and are generally right when they scoop things and reveal scoops, and those are people like Jeff Snyder, who we've been talking about more recently. Now, there are other people, I would say a few tiers down. I would go with the leakers and the scoopers, because again, no disrespect to them or whatever, but I think generally they're wrong more times than they're right. Now they are right, some of the time, but there are scoopers that are more right than others. And I think what happens is that there's a kind of confirmation bias that goes on where, they get one really interesting thing right. Like, for example, let's just say, random thing. Doctor Strange appears in Fantastic Four First Steps. And let's say that, they get that right and they say that like in February of 2025. And then we all remember that and then we're like, whoa, that's crazy that they reported that earlier. But I think we all forget, there are a lot of things that they get wrong. So, I remember there was a point when the leakers and the scoopers were all like, Magneto's appearing in Deadpool and Wolverine, and then that never happened, obviously. So again, just not to say anything bad about anybody, but just to kind of level set. So anyways, there's that. Now, in the middle, in between those leakers and scoopers and people like Jeff Snyder, is there are other people who generally seem to have some inside information, but aren't usually scoopers. And I consider those people, in fact, people who I listen to quite often, people like Christian Harloff and John Campea, for example. John Campea, will sometimes reveal some scoops, and apparently Christian Harloff has now some inside knowledge, because these are 2 scoops that he apparently has exclusives on that we're going to talk about now. I want to say this because I really like Christian Harloff. I listen to his show a lot, or at least I used to, and I listen to some of the clips that he posts and stuff like that. I like Christian a lot. I don't know how reliable the stuff he has is. I don't know how reliable it is, and sometimes, like for example, I say the same about John Campea. I listen to his show a lot, but John will say, yeah, I have an inside source, and I think it's generally trustworthy, but I don't take it to the bank, right? So Christian says these 2 things about upcoming Star Wars projects, and I'm not going to take them to the bank. Rather, we're going to treat them as rumors for now, and let's just talk about them as if they're true, and then I'll give some percentages as to how likely I think each one of them are. So let's start with the bigger one, or actually no, change my mind mid-sentence. Let's start with the smaller one. So there's a report going around from Christian Harloff that Mandalorian and Grogu will have a bounty hunting villain from the Clone Wars series, and that is Embo. Now, for those of you who don't know Embo, don't worry, because when I first read this report, I was like, who's Embo? And then I looked at the picture and I went, oh, of course, that's Embo. And honestly, Embo, because I'm a big Clone Wars fan, that was one of my childhood shows. Embo was a character that I thought looked so cool. I don't remember if he debuted in season 2 Rise of the Bounty Hunters, but certainly he was there pretty early, and he came, he was there on and off, right? On and off during the duration of the show. And so he was one of the characters that I thought looked so cool. And the hat, I think the hat could definitely look goofy on a lot of other characters, but for me, it really worked for Embo. So yeah, I thought he was such a cool looking character. Now, we didn't get a whole lot about him as a character, right? We just kind of saw him and he did some cool things and chased around Jedi and stuff like that. But apparently Embo, who is, I didn't realize this, was voiced by Dave Filoni in the Clone Wars and is going to be voiced by Dave Filoni, according to Christian Harloff, in Mandalorian and Grogu, is going to be one of the main villains of the movie. And some of the details that he posts about, or he talks about, is that he basically says, so, Embo is going to chase down a captured Rhoda the Hutt to try to kill him, and Din Djarin and Grogu are going to go after Embo to try to save Rhoda the Hutt, who is being played inexplicably by Jeremy Allen White. Now, honestly, if this is true, because again, we're operating under the assumption now, like, let's pretend this is true, and let's say that this is the case. I don't know how to feel about this, because on the one hand, I think it's fine. I totally think, there's opportunity for, Dave Filoni to have any bounty hunting character come on and be the villain and stuff like that. I think that's totally fine. On the other hand, my other reaction, this is what worries me a little bit more. Does this not feel like the plot of just a 30-minute episode of television for Mandalorian? Like, couldn't this have been the pilot of Mandalorian Season 4? Now, granted, Christian has not said that this is the entire plot of the movie. Like, certainly there could be other things going on, and who knows, Moff Gideon might make another appearance. There might be a bigger overarching scheme. But, and John Campea, I think, pointed this out on his show, this is basically the plot of the Clone Wars movie. And that movie, for what it's worth, is basically just an episode of the Clone Wars. And, I mean, I don't know. Say what you will about that movie. That, you know, it has a lot of cringy things and it was sort of made for kids and whatnot. But the plot of that movie is that Rhoda the Hutt gets captured, and then Ahsoka and Anakin basically rescue him, and then it's just like a chase for Rhoda the Hutt. And I'm like, if this is the plot of Mandalorian and Grogu, it's a little lame, honestly. I just don't know. I don't know if I love that, honestly. You know, I think that, look, Mandalorian is a show that I enjoy for what it is, but it definitely, to me, does not have the same kind of appeal that a show like Skeleton Crew has had. It just hasn't hooked me in the same way. I like most of the episodes. I think Season 3 was definitely a big downgrade. And I think even in Seasons 1 and 2, there are some pretty weak episodes, in my opinion, which I know is maybe unpopular, but that's my opinion. That's just my thoughts. And I think that this, you know, hearing the synopsis here, or whatever this is, the premise, or even just part of the synopsis, makes me go, this should have just been episode 1 of season 4, right? I mean, maybe not. So anyways, that is that rumor. And I'm cautious about it. You know, we'll have to see if a trailer comes out and there's more to show about it. Because I think that Mandalorian, for being on the big screen, deserves something a little more grand. I'm not saying that he has to, you know, they have to, whatever, dig up the ruins of you know, Death Star 2, and then they're going to make a Death Star 3, and then, you know, Palpatine's clone shows up. I'm not saying that has to happen, not at all. But I think that it's a little disappointing. So, likelihood that this is going to happen, I'd put it at 60%. I wouldn't be shocked if this is what ends up being the case. I'd just be disappointed. So, 60%. Now, the second rumor is a little more interesting and exciting to me. And that is that Ewan McGregor is going to come back to the Star Wars universe, but not in Obi-Wan Season 2, but as Obi-Wan in Ahsoka Season 2, which we recently just got pretty much dead-on confirmation that it's happening, for sure, with the recasting of the late great Ray Stevenson with Roy McCann, and as Baylan Skoll. But, you know, with Season 2 coming on, and we're assuming, I don't think there's been confirmation, but we're all assuming that, you know, Hayden Christensen is coming back. By the way, you know, for all the quote-unquote bad that the live-action Star Wars series have done, the redemption of Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker has been huge. I've just loved seeing it because, again, I think Hayden Christensen is a good actor, really good actor, who just was young and got handed some of the worst dialogue that you could ever be handed. And I think some of the probably the worst direction, you know, because, again, I love George Lucas. He's a visionary. He's amazing. But I don't know if he was the best, you know, person to direct those movies and certainly not to write them. So anyways, I think the redemption of Hayden Christensen, I loved him in Ahsoka. He was so good in Ahsoka. And those Clone Wars scenes, that just brought my entire childhood back. Now, in the context of the show, Ahsoka, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, honestly. It just felt like Dave Filoni was like, here you go, you know, Clone Wars, and I ate it up, for sure. But, you know, if you're looking back at Ahsoka holistically, I was like, yeah, I don't know. So, anyways, Christian is reporting that Obi-Wan will make an appearance in Ahsoka Season 2, and Ewan McGregor will be reprising his role. Now, on a couple levels, number one, I really like this because, A, I want Ewan McGregor to come back because I just think he's fantastic. He's a great Obi-Wan. He's one of those castings where, you know, you recast younger just to tell a prequel story, and it works out just as good, if not better, than the original. I think about James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. Somehow they nailed both of those castings for the younger Professor X and Magneto, in my opinion. And Ewan McGregor is the same. He nailed it as Obi-Wan. He was one of the shining spots of the prequels, right? So I think more Ewan McGregor is great. But on top of that, I didn't need to see an Obi-Wan Season 2. You know, like, what else is there to say about Obi-Wan? Because I know he's been saying in press junkets and stuff, well, you know, there's more to tell. There's more story to tell. And I'm like, what story is there to tell? You know, just hanging out in the desert. He meets Darth Vader again? Like, is that what happens? I don't think so. So I think this is a great way to incorporate Ewan McGregor back into Star Wars again, because there are two very plausible, and I think, you know, likely scenarios that you could go if Ewan McGregor comes back. Number one is as a Force ghost. And I think that's interesting because I think it's less likely, honestly, than the other option, because, you know, the Force Ghost, first of all, that you see of Obi-Wan is the Alec Guinness version in Return of the Jedi. Now, I know they replaced the Sebastian Shaw, I believe his name's Sebastian Shaw, version of Anakin Skywalker with Hayden Christensen later on in the special edition, so it's not a big deal. Like, if Ewan McGregor just shows up as Obi-Wan's Force Ghost, like, get over it, it's fine, whatever. But that is a small continuity thing. The other option there, though, in terms of that is that you could have, because it seems like there's going to be some discussion of the Mortis gods, which is very deep into Clone Wars lore, which, seems like that's what Dave Filoni seems to be doing that these days. But at the Mortis gods, someone pointed out on a website that, the three characters that were there were Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka. And that seems to make some sense. Like, maybe he doesn't come back to life, but maybe Ahsoka, is there. And it's kind of like World Between Worlds, where Anakin wasn't a ghost in the World Between Worlds, but he was physical somehow. So maybe, Ahsoka re-enters that plane of the Mortis gods, and she sees Obi-Wan again, And that would be pretty cool. Honestly, that'd be really cool. The other, though, much more likely scenario is that it's more Clone Wars flashbacks. And I think that's totally fine. Now, I think it's totally fine as long as it's in service of the story, because the World Between Worlds stuff, I loved it. I rewatched that episode sometimes just for that. It didn't make any sense in terms of the grander plot. Not at all, And at the time, I even remember saying, well, this was awesome, but we'll have to see how it pays off. And it didn't. It didn't pay off at all. So as long as the Clone Wars flashbacks make sense, I'm on board. Now, I think it raises another question of why don't we just do the live-action Clone Wars? It seems like Dave Filoni is hell-bent, if these rumors are true, to just be, let's just put as much Clone Wars back into, into the live-action Star Wars stuff as we possibly can, which I'm on board for to an extent, right? Like, Cad Bane came back, and Boba Fett, well, Boba Fett was Boba Fett, but like Cad Bane came back, and Embo maybe being the villain, and Rut of the Hutt, and now Ahsoka, and all the Rebels characters, obviously, from Rebels, but in my opinion, why don't we just make that live-action Clone Wars show with Ariana, I think her last name's Greenblatt, something like that, the young girl from Barbie, and she played young Ahsoka in Ahsoka Season 1. Why don't we just have a series with her and Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor? Let's go. I'd love that. So, again, to me, this makes some sense, Ewan McGregor coming back. I'd give it a 75% chance. I think it's somewhat likely, even just for a cameo. It doesn't have to be an extended role. Just for one episode, like Hayden Christensen was pretty much there for one episode. Maybe he popped up a couple more times, but I think this makes total sense. So guys, those are two rumors from Christian Harloff, which again I'm not taking to the bank, but I'm saying they could be true, and I'm honestly saying both of those things are more likely than not. So what do you guys think of this? Do you guys think this is likely? Let me know in the comments down below.